Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're here with a wonderful conversation that we're about to have with Herman, the founder of Bitcoin Ekasi in South Africa. And of course, my name is Taj here hanging out with the Wolf Bitcoin crew. Always excited to speak about things. And this one I'm really excited about simply because this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. Those of you that have been on spaces with me always hear me bring up circular economies and all the things that's happening all around the world. And today I have someone who is right in the midst of that, boots on the ground, if you will. Good morning or good afternoon, Herman. How you doing today?
Yeah, good man. Good afternoon. I think it's a little late to hear that it is your side. Doing well.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. No, I really appreciate you being here and having this conversation. You guys are doing some amazing things over there. If you mind, just telling us just a little bit about Bitcoin Ekasi, those of us that are not familiar with everything that you guys are doing over there, just a little brief background before I start to really dive into the meat of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure, man. It's very simple, really. We took an existing community organization in 2021, and we essentially used that as a platform to start building a circular economy, a Bitcoin circular economy. The way we did that was we flipped all the salaries from fiat over to Bitcoin. So um, we'd been operating that small community charity for about 10 years by that stage. We started in 2010 with the nonprofit, but in 2021 we switched to doing fundraising in Bitcoin, and we switched to paying salaries of all staff members in Bitcoin. The charity runs daily programs for youth from a very poor local neighborhood. We focus mostly on younger kids. We teach them surfing, amongst many other things, try and create some youth empowerment. Um, and we pay salaries in Bitcoin since 2021, and we onboard shops in the local community so that the coaches and staff can spend their Bitcoin salaries without converting to fiat. And that's it in a nutshell, really.
Awesome. No, that really is exciting in the sense that not only are you guys onboarding people, teaching people, but then the local community aspect of it. And I think that's one of the interesting things about the circular economy aspect of it that might be overlooked, I guess you would say, in the West, such as, in the US, where that might not be the focal point of Bitcoin. So really excited to dive into all of those things and how you're onboarding the locals. But also, in addition to that, you just recently had a conference, one that I wish I could have come to. A little bit about that. Would you mind sharing how that went and the highlights of that?
For sure, man. I mean, we looked at the landscape in South Africa in 2024, and we realized that there isn't really a conference in Southern Africa that focuses on grassroots adoption. And so we got together with a few other companies and projects. We don't host the conference on our own. That would be very difficult. But Bitcoin Ekasi is a co-host of adopting Bitcoin Cape Town, which is the conference. And we had the first event in January 2024. We did the second one in 2025, and we just had our third annual event in January this year, and we're planning the fourth one for next year, February 2027. So it's a grassroots focused a conference. So it's not all about circular economies. We talk about all kinds of other things related to Bitcoin, but the focus is on the adoption of Bitcoin by ordinary people. People like you and me, people that I would meet in my everyday life. We're not too interested in what's happening in the world of sort of corporate adoption. I mean, we do spend some time talking about that. It's not a super technical conference, although we do have some workshops that focus on a few technical developments and so on. But it's mostly all related back to how this can be applied by communities and small businesses that are adopting Bitcoin. What does the adoption of Bitcoin look like, and what does it mean for the everyday person? That's the theme of the conference.
That's really cool. And the name says it a lot, adopting Bitcoin. And One of my favorite places to kind of hang out on the internet is just like these pleb stories where people are speaking about how they came into it and how really impacted their life in ways that are just very common, simple, everyday stories, not mega investors trying to get generational wealth, but just simple problems that were solved around the world. I always find that to be very interesting. So really
Yeah,
cool that hopefully next year I will be at that conference. That's definitely on my to-do list. So looking forward to that right there.
we'd love to have you, man.
Absolutely. So, going back to the mission of what you guys are doing, of course, onboarding people, educating people, and onboarding small businesses. How does that conversation usually go? Because there's a lot of objections where with people not really understanding how this will benefit a business. And how do you normally do that, the onboarding process to get a business owner understanding what's going on?
I mean, it's been an interesting learning curve for me, and I think it speaks to my own experience as well. Although I never really quite understood it that way. I try to onboard people by explaining to them for many years. I try to onboard people by explaining how wonderful Bitcoin is and how it's going to change the world and blah blah blah. And um, I never had much success onboarding people until we started the Ekasi project. And when we started this project, what I realized was that you got to identify the problem first, and then you got to offer Bitcoin to a person if it solves a problem for them. If it doesn't solve a problem for them, or they don't have any problems to solve, then Bitcoin's not a solution for them, and there's very little chance that they'll be interested in it. Why should they? The average person has to work hard to make ends meet. Most people, work one job or two or more to survive, and surviving is tough. People don't have a lot of spare time quite often, um, and so wrapping their head around complex ideas is not something that a person is going to do in their spare time. They're more likely to engage in something that's relaxing, like watching a mindless TV series or something like that. It's rare, it's exceptional that a person is going to obsess about things like Bitcoin in their spare time if they're struggling to make ends meet. And so if a person like that doesn't have an immediate problem or don't perceive any immediate problems, then they're unlikely to spend much time listening to you talking about Bitcoin, because they don't see how it helps them. But if you can identify where a person is struggling and identify a way in which Bitcoin can be applied to help, and you give them Bitcoin as a solution, and you don't bother with all the unnecessary details, um, then that's the way to onboard them. And I say unnecessary details. Obviously, education is super important, and you want to educate people on things like self custody, etc., etc. Um, but it's not the way to start. The way to start is to simply say, look, this is how Bitcoin can solve your problem, if that's something that you want to do. And the light bulb went off for me personally. Well, I mean, on several occasions, but I remember one sort of instance specifically when we started demonstrating to people in the slums where we operate how you can buy phone credit using Bitcoin. And for many people, this had been the first time that they purchased phone credit in a digital way. Because up until even now, most of them live largely cash based, paper notes, paper notes and metal coins. And so, if that's your primary means of exchange on a daily basis, there's no way that you can make digital purchases. And so, the first thing we started doing was going out showing people that I can send you a few sats, and you can buy some phone credit, and you can do that all from the comfort of your home. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to walk down the street and risk getting mugged by gangsters if you wanna buy some phone credit. So that's typically how we do it. We identify the problem, and we go from there.
I think that's really important because the first person that really tried to onboard me into Bitcoin was doing it from the standpoint of, hey, man, this thing's going to the moon. You're going to get rich. And that completely turned me off. Right. was just like that was not a message that resonated with me at all. And it wasn't until years after. This is when I was in New York, when I moved back to Jamaica, and I was just having a lot of problems like with transferring money. Um, just I saw local problems like there's no Zelle, there's no PayPal, there's no Cash App or any easy way of actually transacting. And I'm like, man,
Yeah,
there's so many problems here. And that's why I like how you said, like, start with the problem first and then present the solution. Because when my friend just came to me and said, hey, check out this thing, you're going to get rich with it, it completely turned me off for years. It
yeah.
just went over my head. So
No, absolutely.
yeah, and I do like that in the sense that you start where the problem is. And one thing that I also I find very interesting, that you said that I don't think a lot of people that would be watching this or understanding this, like how phone credits even work. So like in most places, like the US, Canada, North America, it's like a phone plan. And around the world, most places you get a prepaid amount, like a dollar amount or whatever it might be, and you add that onto your phone account. You can use it for internet, texting, and so on. And it's a constant for us where I live in Jamaica. People go to the grocery store. So in case you're watching and you're not really familiar, like what does he mean by phone credits and so on? A lot of the world, that's how they operate. They get these little vouchers and they type in a code and add to their account. And usually it's a cash transaction. So
Yeah.
going back to this right here, when you're speaking to these various people and introducing them this new form, what's like the first question that usually comes up? Because trying to get okay, here's the problem, here's the solution. Onboarding them now, where do they normally go with that? Like, where's their mind? Like, are they just receptive to this whole thing, or do they have more questions than you usually anticipated when you first started?
Well, there's a couple of things that actually all tie in with one another there that you just pointed out. I mean, the first thing to say is that just on the phone credit topic, actually, what's quite interesting is that in many places across Africa, phone credit actually functions as a form of money. So when you buy this prepaid credit, as you mentioned, it's normally a cash transaction, like physical paper cash that you exchange for phone credit at a little small corner store. These corner stores are normally sort of accredited vendors for the large telecommunications companies that they sell the phone credit. It normally comes on like a little piece of paper that's printed out, and you've got a long number that you type into the phone, and that just then credits your phone number with a set amount of prepaid credits that allows you to send texts or these days convert to data. But in many countries, people use these credits as money, and there's these mobile money operators where you would turn cash into phone credits, and then people end up sending these phone credits back and forth between each other as a form of value exchange. So I then essentially pay you in phone credits, or what they call mobile money, which is quite interesting. I think that's a concept that is quite foreign in first world countries, but it's ubiquitous across Africa. So the other thing that you mentioned about this whole like get rich quick thing, about how that turned you off when somebody approached you the first time, that is typically the reaction that people have first time when we come to them with Bitcoin, where we're onboarding people, and it's because the prevalence of scammers are so high in these communities. Where, I mean, look, one of the biggest challenges is a lack of education and just like basic literacy. So it's one of the things that I learned through the course of this project was that there's a significant number of people who rely on the animations on the physical notes and coins, on the money that they use, to understand the value that they're exchanging. So they can't read numbers, and so when they go into the shop, they would use the physical appearance of the note itself rather than the number. So if there's a picture of a lion or a picture of an elephant or whatever, that's how they associate the value of the money that they're exchanging. And so obviously that's a problem with Bitcoin, because now you're dealing with numbers on a screen, and so you really need to be able to count. And so that just demonstrates to you like what type of socioeconomic environment we're operating in. And in these environments, scams are very, very prevalent because it's relatively easy to scam someone that is not as financially sophisticated um, as you'd need to be to identify something as a scam. You know, look, if somebody comes to me and starts selling me some trading product, I'm very quickly going to be able to figure out that no, this is not how things work. But if I don't understand mathematics and I cannot read properly, then it's probably easier to lure me in, especially if I'm desperate. Then it becomes even easier to lure me into that. So that's typically the first response that we get. Even now, we're going on to 5 years of running this project. We still run into that all the time. People have been so badly burnt by scams that it's really quite challenging. But once you get past that and you can demonstrate that it solves a problem, and in most cases the problem that it solves is um, cheap access to a way of moving money around, then they become quite curious because typically it's very expensive to move money. I mean, if you're talking about cash, it's very expensive to move because you have to physically drive the cash from one place to another. But even if you're talking about banking, it's not cheap. South Africa has relatively high banking costs relative to the average income. The banking costs are very high, and so when people figure out that they can download as many wallets as they want, they can create as many new wallets as they want. It's basically an app that you get off the App Store. Um, Sometimes you don't even need an app from the App Store because we've got Bitcoin wallets that work without internet access on old dumb phones. So you can literally just dial the number and you've got access to a wallet. So once people figure out how easy it is to access this and that there's no fees involved or hardly any fees involved if it's custodial Lightning, then they become very curious, and it becomes sort of like um, a small um, a small sort of experience and empowerment to feel like, hey, I'm not being screwed over here. I'm sort of the master of my own money, so to speak. That's typically the second reaction that we get.
It's so funny because we have a lot in common here. As I said earlier, that where I live right now, where I'm streaming from, is Jamaica, and they had a serious problem when they came out with a $5,000 bill. Like, Jamaica's money is 1 US is worth 160 Jamaican dollars at the current time. So, huge problem with inflation and devaluation of the currency and so on. But they came out with a $5,000 bill, which is similar in color to the $500 bill. So, all across the country, you had people go into the market that were spending $5,000 bills thinking that it was a $500 bill. They didn't, even here, they didn't quite understand how people were looking at money and using it. They weren't reading the notes. And for someone who grew up, in the States, where all the dollars are green, like, or a bluish tint, like, they all look the same for the most part. You just know by looking at it and reading it. That was shocking to me, but it was happening for about 2 years actually after the $5,000 bill came out. People were going to the market, spending $5,000, and then realizing that their money was short, and it was just really interesting there. But the other thing that I found really interesting with that too, what you just said, is the relative cost of banking in most countries is pretty ridiculous. You'll be surprised because a lot of times too, up to last night, I was on LinkedIn. I was speaking to someone. They're like, "Oh, well, anyone that's doing transactions in Bitcoin is probably doing it for criminal activity." I was like, "You don't understand because you're in a very privileged country where it's easy to shift money around, right?" So it's a completely different conversation. So a little bit more on that as to the importance of circular economies, getting people in and spending this. That's really the foundation of what this is, and adapting and spreading around the world. Just a little bit more on that because I don't think it really sinks into people in the West, especially in the States that just do not have those problems. So, just a
Mm.
little bit on the importance of that and why this is something that it should be really looked on around the world.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of directions you could go in with that.
Yeah. It's a loaded
But
question or a loaded statement.
yeah, I mean, I do appreciate that you understand the perspective we're coming from here. I've never been to Jamaica, but I've been to Central America. I spent 6 weeks in El Salvador with my family at the end of 2024, and we were also in Costa Rica, but more so El Salvador. Costa Rica is pretty well developed compared to El Salvador. El Salvador still has a long way to go, but a lot of similarities there, and I think I think the one direction that I could go in with that is to say that, you know, a Bitcoin circular economy introduces Bitcoin um, as a spending mechanism, but the ultimate goal is still financial empowerment, and ultimately that comes down to saving in Bitcoin. But the thing that you have to remember is that typically, because we're dealing with environments where education is such a massive challenge. I mean, the government run education system in South Africa is a total mess. You know, there are children finishing high school after 12 years of attending school that have never read more than one paragraph at a time, and will probably never read the first 2 pages of a book in their life. And so and the children get pushed through because there's such a huge backlog of children that are waiting to come into school, that's and the teachers are so overwhelmed and so understaffed, and the resources are so scarce that you can understand that this is just a massively challenging situation. In this type of environment, it's very difficult to expect someone to learn to trust and understand the Bitcoin ecosystem through sort of traditional means of education. Obviously, you want to try and improve the traditional educational means and access as far as possible. But if you're going to introduce someone to Bitcoin and they cannot read properly, the best way to do that is to probably do it through practical demonstration. If I can take you to a local corner store and demonstrate to you that this person behind the counter will accept your Bitcoin, if you need bread and milk, and you do that every day for 6 months, you're probably going to end up trusting this new system that I've introduced you to without fully understanding how it works. But the point is that you trust it because the people around you are willing to accept it as money, and so you can take care of your own needs. And so if I start paying your salary in that new form of currency, you'd probably be happy to accept it because you know that you can use it. And then over time, you notice that the value of this new currency tends to slowly increase while the value of your old fiat currency tends to slowly decrease. So if you'd measured your bottle of milk and your loaf of bread in your local fiat currency, you'd notice the price going up over time. Whereas if you measured that same product in Bitcoin, in sats, you'd notice the price going down over time. Not over the short term necessarily, but over the long term. When we started this project, the price of Bitcoin was less than half of what it is now. And so over the long term, that has definitely been the case. People have seen the appreciation. And so this gets them to trust the system, use the system, and ultimately end up deciding for themselves that, hey, this is maybe something that I should be saving in. And that's what creates, hopefully over the long run, creates a financial empowerment, because ultimately that is perhaps the biggest problem that we're trying to solve. Is we're trying to get people to think about their own future, take responsibility for that future. And one of the ways you do that is by taking some financial responsibility for your future, rather than rely on a nearly entirely bankrupt state to take care of you one day. And it's just not going to be there. So it's a big challenge. It's a large task, and circular economies play a powerful role in that, because we can get people to come in and visit this little microcosm and experience that for a significant number of people. Not hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe a total of about 500, anywhere between 500 and maybe 600, 700 people in our community. Bitcoin has become everyday money. It's not a strange thing anymore to receive it as payment. People are using it to pay rent. People are earning their salaries in it. Um, the corner stores all over the community accept it as payment. It's not a funny thing anymore. And people are saving in it, and that's ultimately what matters. And we've gotten to this point, while we focus a hell of a lot of energy on proper education, particularly with the next generation. We understand that there are other ways to get people into the system and get them to trust the system, and practical demonstration is a very powerful way, and circular economies is perfect for making that practical demonstration, not only for the people who live in our community but for outsiders as well. It's one of the most exciting things to experience, somebody from the outside coming in and having this sort of eye-opening moment and seeing, wow, actually this is very different from what I experienced it. I bought Bitcoin on Coinbase 6 years ago. I've been watching the number go up over time, but other than that, I haven't really done anything with my Bitcoin. And then for them to come in and see that there's this whole other world of possibilities, where this doesn't have to apply everywhere all at the same time, but it does apply for some people.
Yeah, really, really interesting things that I like that you mentioned the corner store videos. By the way, so on Saturday nights, Saturday evenings, 7 p.m. Eastern our time, I do a stream called Good Bits, just highlighting all the positive things that's happening within Bitcoin. Has nothing to do with charts, prices, anything of that nature. And one of the
Nice.
segments that I highlight is circular economies. And quite a few times I played a few of those clips that you have up on your page with them going into a corner store and the music and everything. I was like, man, this is a vibe. So I want to say whoever's producing those videos, kudos to that person. I love those highlights of people just going into those corner stores and making a purchase, because that's something that resonates around the world, right? People have to go to the corner store and pick things up. Most people around the world are not thinking about saving their wealth and generational money and all those things. Like, they're thinking of, how am I going to get dinner for tonight? So I love those videos. So great job you're doing there.
Thanks, man. I mean, the videos are that the funny thing about them is that sometimes they look a little staged, but that's always what happens when you put a camera in front of someone. They feel a little awkward. But the funny thing is that the videos are, it's the thing that's portrayed in the videos is happening every single day on a regular basis. We only film them from time to time. But it's become so normal. And I really push the team hard to try and produce these little short video clips, because I think it is a very powerful demonstrating force. Putting a little video on a social media, it's always going to be staged. But the point is, if you're doing it often enough, at some point you have to ask yourself the question, but man, these guys are doing this every single day. So all these video clips can't possibly be, there has to be something real behind it. And I guess these days with AI, you can produce video where it's entirely fake. But in our case, I think the videos have been quite powerful. These little short spending videos. It's been super cool to see them have fun making those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. And anytime someone says to me on a space or wherever that, no one's spending Bitcoin, I go pull up one of those things and send them a DM or tag them in it or something, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? It's just something that, we don't really necessarily see a lot on the state side or in North America. But also, another thing that I find very interesting with like getting people excited in the local experiences, I think here that's something we can also relate to, because one huge problem we have, most people think of Jamaica, they come to a resort and they just hang out and they have a good time and then they go back home. And they never really experience the people, the culture, and so on. So one thing that I really love about Bitcoiners is that we have a sense of adventure. We're willing to step out of the resort, go mingle with the people, eat the local food, and so on. And I find it very beneficial for local businesses, even if it's only one or two sales per month, right? To just offer Bitcoin as a payment, because you're going to attract all of these people that would probably never have come to your store. And is that a talking point when you go to these local businesses and bring that out to them, that like you're going to attract people that might not otherwise come here?
Um, in a way, yes. I mean, so it's kind of funny because we actually just finished a post conference road trip. Or when we do the conference every January, I mean, I guess next year it'll be in February, but the last 3 years it's been in January. We always do a road trip after the conference where we take a bunch of. Normally, these are people that are from overseas, come to the conference from overseas, and then we go and visit. Um, 3 or 4 circular economies. We've got quite a few of these circular economies along the coast here. Um, there's about you could visit 4 or 5 different circular economies, all within like a 3-4 hour drive from where we are. And it's one of the craziest things to see these Bitcoiners come in, and they get so excited about going to a shop, not because of what's in the shop necessarily, but at least half the excitement is because of the fact that they can pay with Bitcoin. Um, especially if it's a purchase where the owner receives the Bitcoin. So it's a peer-to-peer transaction. So there's no fiat intermediary between the client and the store owner, particularly if it's a business that's where the owner is the one standing behind the counter. Then Bitcoiners become very excited because they're dealing with the owner of the business and they're buying what they need in Bitcoin, and they know that the other person is receiving the sats. So it's interesting, and it's particularly interesting because my wife and I run a tour operator, and that's how we pay the bills. And so we deal with regular tourists, but then once a year when we do this road trip, we deal with Bitcoin tourists, and it's a totally different type of tourist. The regular tourists want to do all the regular touristy things, and whereas the Bitcoiners are like, yeah, that's great, I like that, but where can I pay with Bitcoin? And so um, so it's a very different vibe, and it's also great. I mean, and this is one of the things that people maybe don't understand. If you're a Bitcoiner that's been hodling for a while, and you're wondering, what can I do? One of the most impactful things that you can do is to go and visit a local circular economy, and pay with Bitcoin, because quite often these circular economies are in communities where it's a very small, tight-knit community. Everybody knows everyone else, and so it's very obvious when people come in from the outside. Typically, you don't see these projects in large cities where nobody knows anyone on a personal basis. You see them in small communities, and so if somebody comes from the outside and they get excited about paying with Bitcoin, it sends a very, very strong signal to the people in the community that, hey, this thing is way bigger than this one crazy guy in my community that's been trying to get me to accept this thing as payment. It's way, way bigger than that, because there are these crazy people who are coming in from outside who want to now also pay me in this thing. And it becomes this extra touch point, that kind of validates the whole experience. So I mean, it's hugely impactful. It's way more impactful than what people maybe understand. So definitely worth pointing that out.
I think, yeah, the international aspect of it, because even I remember last year, May, we had, the Bitcoin Pizza Day celebrations and so on going out. One of the things that what happens here is one of the local pizza chains, which, Jamaica is not pizza country, but there is pizza here. So we found this place, got them on there, and we have this event when we go there. And I got in contact with the fellow that runs Bitcoin Dominicana right before the event, and he was like, "Hey, we'll sponsor you guys a pizza." So to go there and just tell people, like, "Hey, we have friends over in Bitcoin. We have friends over in the Dominican Republic. that also are Bitcoiners and would like you to have a pizza. That just blew people's minds. Like there's people over in the Dominican Republic that are buying us pizza right now. It just opened up a conversation. It's like, yeah, this thing is global. People all around the world are into this. So I think it is really important to see that it's not just us, the local guys, boots on the ground, because people get used to us, but to see that it's actually a global thing. You can go anywhere in the world and Bitcoin will be Bitcoin. I think that is something that people have to grasp. But going back to what you just said about that road trip, I have to bring up the vehicle, the the Bitcoin themed vehicle that you have on these road tours. I don't know if anyone watching this has ever seen this vehicle, but just head over to Bitcoin Ekasi, either the website or the page, which we'll tag in the description and so on. But this thing is absolutely awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how this thing came to be, and the excitement of driving this thing around? Because I know you have to stop. People have to stop you to want to talk about this thing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, just before I touch on that, one other thing I'd like to mention with the whole global aspect is that I think people that are very and I mean typically Bitcoiners are quite well connected when it comes to internet communication. Yeah, we were all on X, where some of us are on Nostr. We're all getting on video calls all the time. We all use email, DMs, Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, whatever. So communication is not a funny thing. But typically in these localized Bitcoin circular economies, you're typically also dealing with communities that don't often have such a well-established global network of communication. Often their communication is very, very local and face-to-face, and so they spend most of their time communicating with their neighbors and their friends and their family, and they do that in face-to-face communication. And so what one has to understand is that money is a form of communication. You communicate signals by exchanging your energy for a currency, and then using that currency to go and buy other stuff. And if you connect people to a global communication network, particularly a monetary communication network for the first time, when what they've been used to up until that point is very much only local communication, that's all in person and it's not global, it's a hugely empowering effect. All of a sudden they feel connected to the rest of the world, whereas before they might have felt totally separated from it and disempowered because they're separated from the rest of the world. So it's a very empowering effect that people also often don't think about, but can experience when you see the reaction of people in these local circular economies that are perhaps transacting with a foreigner for the first time, and yet the transaction is so easy and so smooth because it's happening across this global network. But yeah, back about the vehicle. I mean, dude, that thing is a conversation starter. We built it in, I think it was 2023, and it was thanks to Bitcoin Beach, which is based in El Salvador. It's the circular economy project that inspired ours, and so the founders of Bitcoin Beach very generously offered to help us build this vehicle, and it's just been such a valuable asset. It's a 1994 Toyota Land Cruiser 80 series, and when we bought it 3 years ago, it had 500,000 kilometers on the odometer. So it's not it was back in its day, 30 years ago, it was a high-end vehicle. It's now a very, very old high-end vehicle, but we converted it into a Bitcoin Land Cruiser. It's got real antelope horns on the front, so those things are real. We took them off of a real animal that was slaughtered for meat, and we painted the horns orange. Yeah, it's just I mean, I don't know what to say. It's a fantastic conversation starter. It breaks the ice of an awkward conversation because it's like this hugely attractive thing, and it draws a lot of attention. But once you get closer to it, you can see that it's a very old vehicle. It's not like a flashy new thing. So once you get closer to it, you can understand that, okay, the branding on this car probably cost more than the car itself. and the branding was not hugely expensive. So it's kind of people have this weird reaction like, well, why would you guys do this to such an old vehicle? It's not like, it's not like walking up and seeing somebody drive a Lambo, and it's got, one or two, funky Bitcoin stickers on it or whatever. It's like, okay, well, obviously this guy made millions with Bitcoin, and now he's driving a Lamborghini, blah blah blah. We all know the story. But when they come closer to this vehicle, they realize that, okay, there's something else going on here, because these guys are driving this really old vehicle. It's a very reliable vehicle. I mean, it's a Toyota Land Cruiser. Those things never die.
Mhm.
They are so popular across Africa. It's like the Land Cruiser and Africa are like synonymous with each other. If you're going to drive across Africa, you're going to do it in a Land Cruiser. So it's a very reliable vehicle. We've been in the 3 years that we've had it, it's never broken down. We've never gotten stuck anywhere, and we drive it all over the country. We use it to take some of our kids to surf events. And so when we attend these events, that's typically the car they go in. And they love driving in it because when they show up to these events, it feels like they're arriving in something. Um, and so it's a great conversation starter. That's basically what it was designed for. It was made to start a different kind of conversation, which is, what the hell are you guys doing with Bitcoin? Like, you're not the
Yeah.
typical crowd that should be into this thing. Like, the thing that I know about Bitcoin is that it's all crypto bros and they all get rich and blah blah blah. But you guys are doing something different. What are you doing? That's the purpose for it, and it's been hugely valuable in that regard.
I like the fact that it is a working man's vehicle, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
okay, what's going on here? Obviously, you're someone who is just not living on the, having a jolly good time, not working. This is a '94 Land Cruiser. Why would you brand this Bitcoin
yeah,
themed? I think that's just a great conversation starter because a lot of people. There's so many misconceptions out there. So I mean, I can't bring up Bitcoin or mention Bitcoin or someone knows here locally that I'm into Bitcoin without them automatically saying something about, oh, you're a trader. I'm like, no, I'm actually not a trader. No, you don't want trading advice from me or anything of that nature. But
no,
like, there's so many misconceptions when you hear Bitcoin, what you think. And but going back to, I like I said, I just think it's a very cool mission that you guys are doing there, and this is a great attention grabber. And I'm a sucker for conversation pieces. A lot of things, actually, right off camera, right here, just completely unplanned. I just ordered this and got this card deck, which I don't know if you could see this, but it's like everything
oh
on
yeah,
the cards are Bitcoin themed. And the only reason why, and I overpaid for these things, by the way, to actually get Bitcoin cards here to Jamaica. I can't even open the box right now. Brand new. It didn't even open it. I'm not going to waste time with that. But the only reason why I bought it, honestly, was the conversation piece. Overpaying for
yeah,
these cards to just go out there and just see people be like, wait, what is this? And I'm like, oh, that's the Bitcoin logo. Let me tell you about Bitcoin. So I'm a
yeah.
sucker for conversation pieces.
No, I mean, it's a great way to start the conversation with something that you just slide in there. And I mean, we that vehicle cost us less than 15,000 US. And when you tell people that, that's really what starts the conversation, and you tell them the age of the vehicle, and you tell them how long it's been around, and they're like, oh, but why did you guys buy such an old vehicle? I thought you guys are Bitcoin traders. I thought, aren't you like really rich? Don't you have like
Yep.
unlimited amounts of money? It's like, no, actually we don't. That's not why we're into it. um but it's tough starting that conversation. It's not so easy. You got to be quite creative.
Yeah, and people are very sensitive about money. But one thing that I
Mm,
do really find the once they have their misconceptions cleared up and like they start to just see the horizon of it, I love how the conversation goes. For example, earlier I mentioned Bitcoin Dominicana. I was on a call, and you're so right. Bitcoiners are so happy to like connect and hop on a Zoom and speak to each other and pass on ideas. And the idea that he gave me was like, hey, you want to start a conversation with your barber? Just ask him if you can give him his tip in Sats. Never
mhm,
crossed my mind. And so I went to him. I was like, hey, I'll still pay you the regular haircut, but I'd like to give you some tips and sats because I'm into Bitcoin. I think it'd be really good for you to understand it. First thing he says is, wow, I've always heard about Bitcoin, never knew how to get into it, and starts to speak to me about it. And then within 2 weeks, he starts to talk about saving for his daughter, who's little. And, when she gets older, he wants to have some fun set aside for her, whether she wants to go to college and whatever. So, a little simple conversation starter. You never know where it's going to go and how it opens up, changes a man's mindset. I think that's what I really love about this and what you guys are doing. I know we covered a lot of ground and a whole bunch of things. I feel like we barely even scratched the surface. So anyone that's tuning in right now, not familiar with Bitcoin Ekasi and all the amazing things that they're doing, let me get this up here so you can actually see. Search that EKASI, check out that, whether it's on X or whichever platform, go to the website and see all the amazing things that's like happening here. But this conversation, I feel like we're just really scratching the surface of all the cool things that Herman and the crew are doing there. And as far as, you know, any kind of closing thoughts, and we have a few minutes here left, where we'd like to land the plane, because or an open invitation, how to connect with you and see some different things, because I feel like there's so much more that we could go into.
I mean, I think to use the plane reference you just made, I think to close out the conversation, what I would say is that I think Bitcoin circular economies are really where the rubber meets the road. It's where the when the plane comes into land, it touches ground for the first time, and ultimately we all want to see Bitcoin become global money, because we think that it can lead to a better, fairer world. Although there are many people who don't agree with that, I think if you do the research, you'll eventually come to that conclusion. It's not going to fix everything, but it does begin to address some very fundamental problems. And I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but I think the point is that if you want to see global adoption, there are many things that have to happen. And the reality is that the vast majority of people are ordinary people. They are not sophisticated financially. They don't trade international forex markets. They don't have stock portfolios. They are ordinary people who don't understand the financial system. They don't understand how they're being screwed over, and they're basically just scratching to make ends meet. That's the reality for the vast majority of people in this world. And the vast majority of people in this world are probably never going to read a book on Bitcoin. That's the reality. They're not going to understand it that way. And so, if you want to see global adoption and you want to push that adoption as far as possible, circular economies fill an important part of the puzzle. It's not the only part of the puzzle, obviously. It's also maybe not even the most important part of the puzzle, but it is a very important part of the puzzle, because it is a way to speak to those ordinary people who, there are so many people who want to ask questions about Bitcoin, but feel too afraid to ask because they don't want to sound stupid. They don't understand what's going on, but they also don't necessarily want to show their ignorance. And that's the majority of people. And how are you going to explain to them what's going on, what's busy happening? I think the best way to do that is to expose them to a circular economy and say, hey, this is a good entry point for you. Your entry point is not necessarily to go out and read the next best book on Bitcoin. Your entry point is obviously not to, go join a meetup of software developers. Your entry point is maybe not even a conference, because you might feel intimidated. But if you go to a circular economy, you're going to be surrounded by ordinary people doing ordinary things. The only difference is they're using Bitcoin as everyday money. Like, okay, so that's kind of what's going on here. So it's a very important part of the puzzle, and there are circular economy projects all around the world. It should be relatively easy to go and visit one, no matter where you are. And that's probably the most important thing about this conversation that I'd like to highlight.
Awesome. And I really appreciate it. You taking the time after all the craziness of the conference, everything that you guys are doing over there, and sharing this with us, because this is a topic that I'm personally passionate about. So happy to bring it to the Wolf audience. And have them see all the cool things that you're doing. So, last thing I will say, definitely again, check out Bitcoin Ekasi, everything that Herman and the crew are doing. I think if nothing else, you will be just amazed at the world that's out there. And then once you find one circular economy, and especially once it starts to ping the algorithm, it's just going to open up the world. My timeline, my feed is actually filled with people walking around buying roast corn on the side of the street in Kenya and Dominican Republic, El Salvador, like all over the world. And it's like once you go down that rabbit hole, you your world will change. So I really appreciate it. And this conversation has been really good. So again, those of you that are just tuning in, my name is Taj. This is Herman from Bitcoin Ekasi, and we were speaking about circular economies. This has been recorded. We will be getting this out, and hopefully you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, either reach out to us, reach out to Herman and Bitcoin Ekasi, see what they're up to, have your questions answered. And also, if you're interested in starting a circular economy, a local circular economy wherever you live, there are countless people and resources all around the world that will help you to do that. Just reach out, ask a question. People are more than happy to hop on a Zoom call, whatever means that you want to communicate, WhatsApp, even. Like there's so many ways to reach out nowadays. There's no excuse for you to not get connected and start that in your local community and solve all the problems of the people that you care about mostly. So, really appreciate you spending the last hour with us. Have a wonderful day. And again, Herman, my friend, thank you for your time.
Awesome, dude. Very appreciate it. Thank you.